Alright, I've got an iPad Pro 10.5 in with a broken screen. I don't know if you can see the cracks along here, along the bottom. Kind of took a hit right there on the corner. It's a great iPad, so it's definitely worth the repair. This one was just dropped off this morning. I'm going to remove this screen, place a new one on it, and I should be able to give it back to him maybe by 5:30. It depends. The home button bracket has to be super glued to the inside of the screen. With this model, there's nothing behind that button to hold it into place, so if you press too hard, it will pop free if you don't use the right kind of glue. A lot of shops don't know that, and they have a lot of iPads come back with upset customers because the home button came in. This one's not going to do that, so it may be tomorrow before I can give the iPad back if I want to make sure that the bond has had time to cure. That's really important. So I'm heating it up on a hot plate, 60 degrees Fahrenheit, which is plenty. You hear a lot of people on the internet say they use 90 degrees, and that's too hot. Early on, I tried it at that temperature after being recommended that temperature, and it ended up messing up the LCD. Had some kind of purple splotching, and I had to replace that on my dime. So I found out with experimenting that 60 degrees Fahrenheit or Celsius is plenty hot. It's plenty hot. You just got to let it sit on there for about 5 minutes. Let it get hot all the way around the edges. With this one, the connector is down here in the lower corner, so I will heat it carefully, unseal all around the edges, and then be careful in that corner not to tear those flex cables. Extremely delicate. You know, the LCD in this device is still good, so it's only the outer glass that's broken, so I can, separate the broken glass from the LCD, and in theory, it can be refurbished. I don't do that here, but I've got a guy, so there's still value in this component. I'll go ahead and turn it off. It doesn't have to be off, but it's probably a good idea. Starting to get warm. Now, with this, it's best to use suction cups to get started. You can find a place that doesn't have cracks if you're able. This one has plenty of area without cracks in it, so I can stick it next to the edge and pull up hard enough to be able to get my Accessimo tool underneath the glass and start to pry up a little bit. I only want to use metal in the very beginning. I don't want to use metal all the way around. So once I get that entry point, I will switch to a spudger, a flat edge of a spudger. You could snag a speaker wire or a flex cable for a camera or an antenna, a lot of things that you can damage if you go too deep with metal, so I have to be careful with that. Alright, I gained access pretty easy. So, I'll switch to my spudger now. I can put it in there and I can twist if I get to a stubborn area that doesn't seem like it wants to come up yet, and that'll help. Actually, this iPad Pro, I was mistaken when I spoke up before. It doesn't connect in that bottom corner. This is the model that they started connecting it right in the center. Makes for kind of an awkward repair, but it's connected right here. So I want to be careful and not to damage that. But the biggest risk for shops like mine on a device like this is this home button. It's got Touch ID functionality. If I am to damage that, the little thin flex cable with all that adhesive that Apple puts in there, if I was to damage that, the Touch ID functionality wouldn't work. It's possible the home button might still work, just depends on how it was damaged. But, you know, for a customer that had an iPad that came in with Touch ID capability, he's going to get an iPad that leaves here with Touch ID capability. So if I was to damage that, then I would replace the entire iPad. I'd buy him a new one that does have Touch ID capability. I would refurbish his, put a working home button in it, but Touch ID would never come back without going to Apple and paying a lot of money to have them calibrate a new home button. So I'm using my tiny Phillips head screwdriver, and I'm using a magnet. It's a magnet that'll allow me to put the screws in a pattern that helps me know where I pulled them from. If I put a screw in the wrong spot, when I put it back together, I could damage it. Some screws are short, some are long. So if I put a long one where a short one came from, it'll dig into the logic board, and there's a lot of filaments running through the inside of those boards, so it would definitely damage something. And if you damage a filament within the board, it's fried. You can't solder and fix something that's layers deep inside your PCB. So you have to be really careful about that. Important, especially on iPhones. Long screw damage is a common problem among new techs. I learned that early on by watching YouTube videos before I started my business, and I've actually, knock on wood, have never had long screw damage in my shop. All right, with it open now, with it open now and freed from all of its edges, I can see the connector in there, and I'm going to be able to take this one off. All other model of iPads, you're able to find and disconnect the battery. In this iPad, they don't make that very easy. You can't get to where the battery connects without first taking off the screen, and that's weird. It runs a higher risk of damage to the logic board. It's missing a screw. Oh, there it is. So there's two screws holding this plate in. So once you take those off, a little plate comes off that holds those connectors down. So now I can use my fingernail to gently pry up those four different connectors. So all these. So now I need to clean up the adhesive. I've got Goo Gone and some paper towels and some tools to help scrape and clean. It's going to be spotless, and that's going to help my new adhesive stick, and the new screen will not come up. But here, now we get to the most risky step, and the biggest threat to any shop is this button here. I have got to get this off of there, this adhesive, and get that off without tearing its flex cable that's thin like this. If I do tear it, then it will be broken, and I can't get Touch ID to work again. Only Apple can. They've got the calibration machine. So if that happens, I would have to buy a new iPad to replace it, but that's not going to happen. I've got experience, and I will be able to get this off of there very carefully if I find the right tools. These here. So before I start putting my iSesamo under the bracket through its adhesives, I'm going to heat it up a little bit to help make that soft. I don't want to go more than 8 to 10 seconds on that. That heat is really hot and it would be easy to melt something important. And there you have it. So this little part plugs into the iPad with a ZIF connector. So I'll have to clean off the old adhesives and put some new stuff on to stick it down on the new screen. So this old screen, I've gotten all I need from it, except for this little piece of tape here that covers the connector for the button. So I'll save that by putting it aside. And then this will go in my stack of good LCDs with bad glass. And my new screen, let's double check. It's a good idea to look over the backs of both, make sure that they have the same exact connectors and that all the components look identical. It is possible to get the wrong screen sent to you, or you may have ordered the wrong screen. But this one looks the same in all ways, so we're good to go. So instead of going right to the iPad and cleaning its edges and getting it ready to have a new screen put on, first we need to prepare this one. And the reason is the adhesives that I'm going to use on this button here to hold the bracket and hold the button in place, it's super glue or something similar, Gorilla Glue. And it needs time to cure. If I give it back to them and this is wet and I close it up, there's not much air in there. It'll take a while for it to harden or cure once it's closed. So I'm going to glue this first before doing any other prep or any other steps. And then I'll have a fan pointed at it and kind of dry it. And this afternoon, I'll check it and see if it's hard enough and cured enough. If it has, then I'll go ahead and seal it up, put it on, seal it up. The outer seal doesn't need that much time. It's double-sided adhesive tape, basically. So I'll put it together, put some clamps on it, maybe make it warm with my hot air gun so that it's nice and sticky, and then let it sit for 20 minutes, and that's good. It's just this home bracket that we have to worry about. If you get it back soft and they push it in, you're going to have to open it back up and do all that under warranty. So who wants to do that? So it looks like some sort of grommet, protective grommet came in. Oh, it came with an extra insulation grommet for the home button if the other one had worn out, but it didn't. So I want to make sure that it fits. I'm just doing a dry test right now. I'm not going to put any adhesives on it yet. I just want to make sure that everything lines up and that it will be okay. There is a little disc that I need to remove. Now it should fit. So I'm doing a dry fit. I'm just kind of putting it in place, and there is no adhesive, so I'm just going to hold my finger on the bracket and make sure I can feel a click in the home button, which I'm not feeling. It may take some time to get it all perfectly lined up. It is, there's not much give. You have to have it exactly perfect. If it doesn't line up, the tiny little dimple on the back of the bracket has to line up with a dimple on the back of the home button, or you don't get that satisfying click feel and sound. And I'm not getting it right now. I think I need to clean off the old adhesive first. It's getting in the way. So I'm going to be very careful, and I'm going to use my metal scraper tool, and I'm going to scrape off this thick double-sided tape that they used. I'll scrape it all the way down where the paint comes off too. There's no harm in that. I want to make sure that there's nothing of substance left over. I don't want it sticking up. Gotta be real careful with this. One tiny slip of my tool and I could slice right through that ribbon cable, flex cable. So I gotta be real careful and move real slow. Alright, let's try this again. So much little pieces of adhesive left. It's making it complicated. Keep digging them out and finding new ones. when when this one is in place, it doesn't have that click. When I pull it out, it does. So that tells me is I may need to bend the bracket just a little bit so that it doesn't touch the back of the home button so hard. I mean, it's kind of pressing it into place. So I'm going to bend it just a little. See if that helps. Aha. Now I got that click, and I feel a click. It's perfect. All right, so what I want to do is test this. I need to make sure, absolutely sure, that everything works before I apply that super glue. I mean, if I've damaged it and I don't see the damage yet, I could be gluing in a broken home button, and that would be bad. So, it's plugged in now. So, let's do a test. It's quite difficult to get these 4 connectors plugged in with the angle that this new design of iPad has. So I start with the back 2, try to get them snapped into place. My lamp where I can see. Well, that is quite the challenge. Okay, get one in place and another one can pop up. Alright, back 2 are in place. So let's bend these top 2 down. Now, if I don't have these lined up perfectly when I press down to plug them in, the plastic connector is so soft I could easily crush it. And if that happens, you've got a big problem. You've got to take the logic board out and solder new connectors into place. You have to take off the crushed ones and solder new ones into place, and that's another difficult repair done under a microscope. So you don't want to do that. So with those plugged in, the home button plugged in, I'm going to do a test. Make sure the home button is working, and look at that, it is. So if I had damaged Touch ID, a message would pop up right now saying Touch ID is unable to be activated. But it didn't, so that means that the button's in good shape. So now I can boot it down and go ahead and do some gluing before I clean up the housing. Come on. All right, so carefully pop those back off. Set your iPad aside, and it's time to add the adhesives that you need to hold that home button on. So I'm going to release the ZIF connector and get that home button plug undone. Move it aside. Now, I've learned through the last few years of business that there are tapes, double-sided tapes, that are better than others. Some of them just are terrible, and if you seal your iPad up with the wrong tape, the screen will come up and they're going to come back unhappy. So trial and error, help from the repair community, lots of friendly people sharing advice. I have discovered something called Tessa tape. Need my scissors. With Tessa tape, things don't come up. They stay where they're supposed to be. So I'm using little pieces of Tessa tape on the underside of the home button bracket before I apply super glue. Super glue will ensure that no one pushes the home button in. Okay, and so once I have the double-sided sticky tape on the back side of the bracket, I can carefully remove the wax coating to reveal the sticky side and place it where it needs to go. Now, the placement is very important. If you're a millimeter off, if you stick it down a millimeter off and those 2 points don't line up, the back of the home button, its little dimple, and the back of the home button bracket and its little dimple, they have to line up perfectly, and if they don't, you will not have a working home button. So take your time, do whatever adjustments necessary, and then do some testing before you glue. So the double-sided tape will hold it in place and allow you to test before. Okay, so I feel and hear a nice click. I don't know if you can hear that. So it's in place. It's in the correct position. Go ahead and plug its plug into the ZIF connector and push down the little bar. And then I set some tape aside that came off the original that helps hold that down, so I'll put that over the connector as well. That's how it comes. It's actually a really good idea to make things look as closely to exact as they came from the original iPad. So if you see tape covering something, put some tape on yours. If you see glue in an area that's holding the bracket somewhere and you don't have that, you need to add it. You need to do what you can to make it look the same. There's little things that they do that we don't understand, but we find out later they might help prevent ghosting or some other weird glitchy problem. Okay, Gorilla Glue. I'm going to use that to hold down this bracket. I'm going to apply it with just the tip of a paper clip. Don't want that home bracket pushing in. Now I am looking underneath the flex cable, but on top of the steel. You don't want super glue all over your flex cable, because if you do have to do another repair in the future, you may have to take that home button off and attach it to another new screen. So I am going to take the excess glue off with a sticky note and leave just the amount needed to hold that bracket into place. You don't want a big clump of it right along this edge, because it needs to sit flat on the housing of the iPad, and if you've got a big clump, it's going to hold it up, keep it up in the air, and not let it seal. Alright, that looks pretty good. All right, so I've got my home button in place. One last check, still has a good clicky sound. So now I've got a little fan over here on the side I'm going to turn on just on low and aim the air at the super glue or the Gorilla Glue. I want that to heal or cure before I close up the device. So now it's time to clean the device up. There's leftover residue from glue all the way around it, so we want to get that up so that your new adhesives can stick well. And I've tried a few different things, different ways and techniques, and what I found to be the best is this Goo Gone and this tool. I wet it all around and I scrape, and it comes up pretty well. The problem maybe is it is a metal tool, so I have to be super careful. If I have a tool slip, I could puncture the battery, which runs all along here and all along there, and it would be easy to come off the edge and poke it. And if I did that, sparks are going to start flying and we're going to have a fire here in the shop. So go slow, take your time, and be very careful if you're using metal tools anywhere around it. I can use my fingernail and poke and get some of that glue off pretty easily already. But what doesn't come off easily, I can get with the scraper tool. Other shops, I've gotten iPads that have come in after being repaired at other shops, and there'll be glue all over the inside and fingerprints and even little pieces of glass. They didn't even blow the iPad out before closing it. And that can cause future problems, or it can cause problems for the next repairman that works on it, you know. So I'm a perfectionist, or at least close to it, so I try to do everything the best I can. I want it to be clean and neat. I don't want other techs repairing after me and having things to say, so I do a good job, and it's good quality work. You want your screen to stick down, and if you don't clean it up well, it won't stick well. Alright, that looks pretty clean. So now let's wipe it up, clean it up, blow some air through it, on it, around it. So after you've dried up everything that you can see, you need to hit it with some compressed air or some air so that you'll see liquid kind of come out in little beads, and it'll show you places that you still need to wipe. Not to mention the glass that could still be in there somewhere. So I use one of these. It's a bad boy. Alright, it's perfect. Not a bit of residue left anywhere around here. Some iPads come with banged up corners, and I've got other videos to show you how to straighten those out. This one does not have a single dent in its entire housing, so it's really nice. I don't have to do any of that. So if you want to see that, look around on my channel. You'll see videos on how to fix a bent iPad, how to fix bent corners. I've got it all on there. This one, I'm not going to do that though. Don't have to. So, back with the test tape. This is 2 millimeters wide. It's perfect for those long edges. So I'm going to get it ready to accept the new screen I've set up. Alright, that does it. I've got tape all the way around all the edges. I'm ready to put the screen on, or at least the iPad is ready. The screen itself. Has some super glue still drying on that bracket, so it's not ready to go on yet. So I will put that on as soon as it's ready. Alright, the super glue or the Gorilla Glue has hardened. It's cured enough, or all the way actually, so it's time to put this back together along with the plate and the screws to hold the thing together. Start with those back two connectors. There's wax tape on two of them, so I'm going to pull that off. That'll help it stick to the plate in front of it. It reveals the sticky underside when you pull those off. So the first two stick down, the second two stick down, but they also have that stickiness to help them stick down. You may need it because this is a complicated connector. It's got to be positioned just right. Alright, those are down. Those are down. Alright, I can't lift the thing any more than that, and I've got to get a screwdriver in there to hold these down. It's not going to be easy. If I had a shorter screwdriver, that would be better. This is as short as I've got. Alright, so I think we're good, but I need to do a little bit of testing. Alright, those are screwed in. I think they're holding everything together, but before I seal it, let's turn it on and do one last test. Let it boot up so that I can test everything. Alright, it's up. One of the things that we need to do to test is to check the touch by grabbing an icon and dragging it around the screen. If it drops out of your finger in the same spot more than once or over and over, then you've got a dead spot. This one looks good. So I'm going to check volume down, volume up. All that looks good. So home button, I'm going to double click. Look at that. Works. Single click. Alright, everything looks good. So now one last thing to do is just to pull off the wax paper on the double-sided tape. So to do that, let me get my tweezers. Go around all sides and pull it up. Once it's all up, just put it down. Alright, we're good to go. You can pull this off anytime you want. I usually pull it off in front of the customer so I can do the big reveal, but I'm going to go ahead and pull it off now and show you. There you have it. Successfully repaired and ready to return to the customer. So there's 30 minutes left in the day. I'm going to text them so they can come back and pick it up same day they dropped it off. If you've got a broken iPad, bring it into Mobile Device Rescue.